On December 16th, 2006, I ran my PR in the mile. I ran 433.46. And in this video, I want to share some of the workouts that I ran leading up to that mile PR. Now, I'm doing this for a couple reasons, but let me share some reasons why I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this to show you amazing miler workouts. This is actually a very interesting PR because I didn't have very many great workouts leading up to this race. I hadn't been training very hard. My mileage wasn't super high. And so this is almost one of those interesting examples of you end up running really fast when you don't actually think you're ready for that kind of a performance. And so one of the reasons why I'm sharing this is because a lot of the times if you don't have the perfect season, you don't have the perfect build-up as you get into a race, a lot of the times you start thinking to yourself that you're not ready for a PR, or this just isn't your day, but you should still get after it because you never know. So this race was the Boston University All-Comer Meet in middle of December in 2006. It was held at the BU indoor track, which if you ever get a chance to compete on this track, it's arguably one of the best indoor tracks in the country, and it's very, very fast. Now there is a conversion for indoor track times. So if you run a certain time on an indoor track, the conversion has you running a little bit faster on an outdoor track because of the turns. Yes, this is how precise and geeky track runners become. So let's start with the workouts that I started weeks before this mile race. So the first workout that I did, let's see, I've got my list here, was 2,000 meters at threshold. What an easy workout. This is actually a very simple workout. It's barely a workout at all. It's 2K, barely over a mile at my threshold effort. This is barely a workout for me at this point in my running career. I'm not even sure why I did this, but the 2 weeks beforehand didn't include any workouts. Yes, I was running strides, but I was looking at my training journal. I didn't actually do any workouts for those 2 weeks leading up to this 4-week block. So I had 2 weeks of no workouts. Then I did 2,000 meters at threshold. The next week, I did 6,000 meters at threshold. Now we are 3 weeks away from the race. So it's very interesting that 3 weeks out from my mile PR, I hadn't been doing any speed work at all, just a little bit of tempo or lactate threshold training. All right, about 2 weeks before the race, I ran 5,000 meters at threshold and then 4x200 meters. I took about a 2-minute jog recovery for all these different repetitions. Now I ran the 5K in 17:27, and then I ran the 200s in 30, 33, 31, and 31. So good aerobic stimulus with the tempo run, and then I got the legs turning over with some really quick 200s. But again, this workout isn't super hard. When I look back on this training, I'm pretty amazed at how fast I was able to run with these workouts that aren't really challenging the VO2 max system that I'm gonna have to rely on in the mile. All right, next we get to the workout that I did immediately before the mile. So this was actually the same week. I ran the mile on a Saturday and my last workout was the Tuesday beforehand. And that Tuesday I ran 2 miles at threshold, and those 2 miles were 11:05. I split 5:34 and 5:31. I took a 2-minute jog recovery. Then I ran 2 times 400 meters and then 4x200 meters. The 400s were in 66, 67, and then the 200s were 32, 31, 31, 31. That was the last workout I did before getting ready for the mile on Saturday. Warmed up for the mile, and then I was able to run my PR, which obviously is great. My 400 meter splits for the mile were 68, 70, 69, and 66. So averaging about 68, I was pretty much running about that average pace for most of the race with a pretty good kick at the end. Now the interesting part is what I wrote in my training journal. Now this is why I love a hard copy training journal and why I created the performance training journal that you can find on Amazon if you're interested, because I love writing down in a log. You're gonna have this forever. You're gonna put it on a bookshelf, and you're gonna be able to come back to that and relive these moments. And when I look back on this day, I wrote, it's kind of funny. I wrote, I felt tight and fatigued, only 400 meters in, but I hung on and finished strong. Very pleased considering lack of quality workouts and how I felt. I can run sub 430 easily. Now this is when the narrator comes in and says, Jason never actually ran a single mile any faster than that day. So I never actually ran that sub 430 mile, which I really wanted to run. Running 433 got me really close to it, and that was a big goal of mine, but I never got there. A lot of folks will tell younger runners, if they compete in high school and college, you will never run another PR in a middle distance race once you graduate from college. And I initially scoffed at that, but I experienced it. Besides this 1 mile PR, I never touched any PR that I've had 5,000 meters and shorter post-collegiately. And I think that's just a function of the fact that the workouts required for those middle distance races usually are so difficult that you really need a team around you. Unless you are a member of a really good club with a really good coach or meeting, it's just gonna be really hard to do those workouts. I could not make these videos without your support. So first, let me say thank you. And this video is brought to you by our very own performance training journal. I have always been in love with hard copy training journals for a few really good reasons. Number one, when I was a new runner and I started keeping an actual training journal like this, I learned so much more about the sport and myself just by that practice. It really forces you to reflect on your training, to think more deeply about what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And if you are constantly reflecting on your training, praising yourself for what's going right, planning for the future, and then looking back on what has previously worked for you, you are gonna really know yourself as a runner, and you're gonna start to make wiser decisions about your training. I also created this training journal because I want you to focus on the training metrics that actually matter. The training metrics that help you improve, get better, and progress with your running. We don't have to focus on everything. We just need to focus on what matters. I also took a lot of inspiration from professional runners that I've talked to on the Strength Running podcast. They're adamant by completing a training journal and reflecting on what works for you and actually giving yourself some praise within your journal. You're essentially completing a gratitude journal. You are building up your confidence in your own abilities over time. And when you look back on that journal before a big goal race, you are going to be reading in your own words why you're capable, why you can do this. And I can think of nothing more confidence building than an act like that. So I hope you check out the new performance training journal. It is now available on Amazon. It debuted as the #4 new release in the running category, and I could not be more proud of it. So thank you again for subscribing to the Strength Running YouTube channel, and I hope you enjoy the Performance Training Journal. I also think it's really interesting to look back on the mileage levels that I ran leading up to this mile race. So you've heard some of the workouts. I was only running one fast training session a week. What was I doing in terms of mileage? Well, if you look at the 5 weeks before that mile, I had a 50-mile week, a 60-mile week, a 66-mile week, a 70-mile week, and then the week of the race was a 70-mile week. So I didn't actually taper or anything leading up to this mile because I don't think it was a big goal race of mine. It was sort of just a couple, this race and one before it, the weekend before, were just races that I sort of entered for fun. But it's very interesting that I didn't taper. It was the highest mileage week of the last 5, and I still ran really well. The day after the mile, I ran a 17-mile long run, so I was still training really hard. And when we look at this example, my ability to run a PR with not amazing workouts and mileage levels that, number one, weren't my highest, so I wasn't in some amazing fitness level, but also were high enough that I'm gonna have some level of fatigue that might negatively impact my training. All very interesting as I look back on this, about 17 years later, but when I do look back on it, a couple lessons emerge. The first lesson is that you don't have to have a perfect training cycle if you're gonna go after a PR. So let's not let poor workouts, lack of workouts, mileage that might be making you tired, or mileage that is not inspiring a lot of confidence in your ability, let's not let those things get in your head and mess with your ability to stay confident and really mentally tough. If you want to race and go after a PR, do it, and do it with confidence regardless of what your training might say. Because sometimes, as this race has shown, you might be able to pull off a really epic race without necessarily the training that backs it up. The other lesson that is very clear here is that aerobic development is really important, even for races as short as the mile. Most of the work that I did before this race was easy mileage, relatively high in the 60 to 70 mile week range. And most of the workouts that I was doing, the actual faster, higher intensity training I was doing, was threshold, was relatively easy for me at the time. Most of my threshold workouts were done about a minute per mile slower than my actual mile PR. And that is substantial. I wasn't really doing very much fast training. And the fast training that I was doing, here's principle number 3, was relatively short. I was getting a high level of exposure to these fast paces, at mile or faster pace, but I wasn't necessarily doing a high volume of this work, nor was I doing long repetitions at these paces. So it wasn't like I was running 800 or 1,000 meters at my goal mile pace, because that's really, really hard. I was running 200s and 400s at about my mile pace. This is typically a level that allows you to run really fast, but without incurring a tremendous amount of fatigue or soreness. So I really like to see runners touch speed, play with speed, get exposure to speed without necessarily killing themselves with really hard workouts. All right, runners, there we go. Those are some of the workouts that I did before my PR in the mile. Now, like I mentioned before, don't look at these as amazing workouts for a miler. These were workouts that I did very early in a season, primarily aerobic, base building oriented with those threshold workouts, but I was also adding a little bit of those fast, short repetitions. Jack Daniels might call those R workouts. Short reps, high intensity, but a fairly high amount of recovery afterward so that you can keep doing them. Now, you might not be training for a mile, you might be training for a marathon, no matter what race you're training for. I hope this video gave you a little bit of insight into workout structure and also just some of the principles that we learned. We don't have to strive for perfect training. Let's do the best we can and then be as confident as possible on race day so that hopefully we can still run really fast.